साहेब बाबा साहेब एक साहेब बाबा साहेब.
My paper is an attempt for integration of Buddhism to terminate the state of war. Buddhism stresses the value of peace, and many Buddhist leaders and organizations today are outspoken in their promotion of non-violence. Protests by Buddhist monks have shaped the modern politics of Asia. The Buddhist tradition is most clearly associated with non-violence and the principles of ahimsa. By eliminating the attachment to material things, Buddhists try to combat covetousness, which in itself has the potential to become a source of anger and violence against others. Buddhist teachings tell us that hatred and aversion, like their opposites, desires and greeds, all spring from a fundamental ignorance. That ignorance is our mistaken notion of our own permanent independent existence. In ignorance, we see ourselves as separate beings, unconnected with others, blinded to our true state of independence and interconnectedness. It is this basic ignorance that keeps us divided. Only practice that leads to overcoming such ignorance will help to free us from the prisons we make for ourselves and for others. We all harbor prejudices of various sorts. There is no exception to this fact. No one of us is completely freed of prejudicial attitudes. We don't like certain colors or sounds. We are annoyed by certain circumstances, behaviors or styles of doing things. We are harsh critics even of ourselves. Having likes and dislikes is taken for granted. Indeed, the ability to discriminate is considered an essential part of what makes us human beings. After all, human beings, unlike other living creatures, can form judgment and make choices. Free will and choice are taken as fundamental rights. So one might ask, what is the problem? The problem occurs, as unfortunately oftentimes in the case, when our own individual likes and dislikes become reified and solidified, when we not only form inflexible opinions but take them as truths, when we form negative judgments about other human beings and about ourselves, and these judgments become for us the lenses through which we view and experience ourselves, the world around us and its inhabitants. At this point, we have entered into the arena of prejudice of a quite pernicious sort, the sort which causes harm and suffering both for ourselves and for others. And whether it be friendships and loving personal relationships destroyed, or wars fought over religion or contested territory, or one group of being dominating another or restraining their freedom of movement, at this point we cease being human beings at our best. Ethnic and racial prejudices run rampant in today's global multicultural society. Our world is filled with conflict. We must condemn the crime but not let our anger accelerate into unreasonable aggression, racism and even more violence in the world. We must get to the roots of this, not just punish individuals. Each and every day, we ourselves encounter and generate prejudicial attitudes and behavior. If we are ultimately to survive at all on this tiny planet that is our mutual home, we must learn to appreciate and to value each other as human beings and thus to live together in peace. While a general disarming of all nation states would seem the ideal, this process cannot be begun until we have first disarmed our own individual hearts. In reality, at our innermost cores, we are all exactly the same. We all are human beings who wish to have happiness and to avoid suffering. Yet out of ignorance, we go about seeking these goals blindly and without insight. We live our lives seemingly oblivious to our own prejudices, even though they are right in front of our eyes. In short, we suffer because we embrace the mistaken notion of our separateness from one another. The illusion of separateness actually works to prevent us from finding the beginning of this erroneous spiral. Buddhist traditions tell us that from the very moment the notion of I and mine arise, there simultaneously arises the notion of not me and not mine. That is, from the moment we conceive of us, there is a them. Once the notions of separateness, difference and otherness enter our thinking, they then go on literally and figuratively to color all of our subsequent experiences, judgment and perceptions. We see the world in terms of us versus them, me versus everyone else, mine versus yours. We are immediately caught up in a world of mistaken, logically unfounded and seemingly uncontrollable hatred and prejudice. And all these dualistic bifurcations occur at lightning speed and for the most part imperceptibly. The very deep rootedness of this mistaken notion of separatedness seems to make it impossible even to imagine its cessation. Yet, as Buddhists also tell us, by insight, ignorance destroyed. To the question then, can racial, ethnic and religious hatreds and prejudices among human beings be ended? The answer arises, yes it can. Of course, ending something so deep-seated and unconsciously operative is not an easy task, but it is a task so urgently needed in our current situation that it is well worth undertaking. The dismantling of hateful prejudices begins with the recognition that we do in fact harbor them. Next, we must be willing to look at our own particular prejudices with honesty and resolve. We need to know how and why we as particular human beings came to harbor the specific views we do, and through this understanding, to be willing now to replace them with more positive views and behaviors. Lastly, we need to know that we can indeed make a difference, that we can work together for positive change in our own society and in the world. Thus, with understanding and with practice comes a softening of our rigid views. Our hearts can open and ultimately we can transform ourselves into loving individuals and loving neighbors. In short, into human beings at our best. Hatred is learned. It must be our task to unlearn it. Racism and racial profiling is learned behavior. We must strive to unlearn it. Ethnic and class distinctions are learned. We must come to see and to appreciate the common humanity that unites us. How Buddhist practice can help to replace a warlike mentality in war-torn country with a peaceful way of thinking. If one could simply decide to become peaceful, gentle and caring in all their interactions with other beings and with the world, then we should be enjoying a culture of peace. Yet, to achieve such a culture is not easy. To do require efforts, resolve, patience, cooperation and practice. Fortunately, however, practice, and here we mean the varied forms of meditative practices that Buddhist tradition have developed, is available. It needs only to be made more easily and widely accessible. Since meditation is the very heart of Buddhism, Buddhists and others should avail themselves of its meditative methods to look deeply into the origins of our various prejudices with regard to ourselves as well as towards others, and to transform them by changing our minds, by changing our views, by becoming more peaceful ourselves, and as a consequence help to engender peace in the world. War is not something abstract. War is waged between one group of individuals and another. The reason for war are also not abstract. It is individuals who decide to wage war, even if the war is global. Its beginning can be traced back to the decisions of individuals. And so, before we talk about global war, let us first talk about war on the levels of individuals. Wars begin because the people of our country, or at least their rulers, have unfulfilled desires. They are greedy for benefits of wealth or power, or they are angry or hateful. Either their desires have been thwarted or their pride, their sense of self has been offended. This can also manifest as racial or national arrogance. They wrongly feel that the answer to the problems, which are essentially, within their own words, a matter of attitudes, can be sought externally through the use of force. Let me just conclude. following are some of the resources found within Buddhist tradition which could help in our quest for peace. Number one, the first necessity is the investigation and understanding of the ground reality with all its ramifications. This is none other than observing the principles of dependent origination. Buddhist thought stresses the importance of investigating the ground reality as comprehensively as possible, not forgetting its viral, psychological and socio-economical implications. On the long-term view, Buddhism offers an important insight by pointing out that peace cannot be achieved as long as the seeds of war rule human minds. That is why the investigation of the psychological realities of our situation is important. The Buddhist ethical training is based on the conviction that hidden propensities lose their potency to dominate the mind when brought under the light of observation. The corollary is that a society that is keen on peace must learn to promote that kind of self-education among its citizens. It would also be quite in keeping with the Buddhist spirit of understanding facts as they really are to recognize that ethno-nationalism is one of the most potent forces in the world whose power we must never underestimate. The reality may even be that the problems created by it are simply too complex to be solved by appeal to reason and morality. And the second one is, there must be the ability to review and leave out or at least mollify exclusivist and rigid positions which in conflict discourses appear in the guise of unnegotiable conditions, clinging to opinions tenaciously, holding that this alone is the truth, has been repeatedly shown in the Theravada canon as a reason for conflicts among people. Emotional attachment to dogmatic views disrupts the harmony of social relations and brings about results which are socially harmful. The abandonment of such attitude is hailed as a sign of a developed mind or of a maturity of character. There cannot be peace as long as people, that is to say the various contending parties, remain irrevocably fixated or divisive and exclusive conceptions of nationality, creed, language, culture and territory. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Madam asked me to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Priyasen Singh and I'm teaching in Gautama Buddha University, Greater Noida.